The courtroom was packed when Emily Carter walked through the side door wearing a simple black judicial robe, carrying a leather folder beneath her arm. Nobody in the gallery recognized her, not the attorneys, not the spectators, and certainly not the family sitting at the plaintiff's table. Her mother-in-law, Victoria, was whispering angrily to her husband while Emily's estranged husband, Daniel, stared at the floor. They had come to court convinced that they were about to win a bitter family lawsuit and publicly destroy the woman they blamed for ruining their son's life. For months they had called Emily a liar, a gold digger, and an embarrassment. They had even told relatives that she had married Daniel for money. Now they believed she was finally being forced to answer for everything. Victoria leaned toward Daniel and whispered with a smug smile, "Today, everyone will finally see what kind of woman she really is." Then the courtroom doors closed, the bailiff announced that the judge was entering, and Victoria's confident expression disappeared the moment she looked toward the bench. Emily walked in, sat down, and calmly said, "Please be seated. This court is now in session." Nobody moved. Victoria's mouth fell open. Daniel's face turned pale. The man who had spent months telling everyone that Emily was an ordinary woman suddenly realized he had never known his wife at all. Because the woman sitting behind the bench wasn't a stranger. She was Emily. The woman he had humiliated. The woman his family had abandoned. And now she was the presiding judge. But there was something even more shocking. Emily wasn't there to punish them. She was there to uncover the truth. 6 months earlier, Emily had been living what looked like a perfect life. She was married to Daniel Carter, the only son of a wealthy family that owned several luxury hotels across the country. To outsiders, the Carters were respected. Inside the family, however, everything was controlled by Victoria Carter. Victoria had never accepted Emily. From the beginning, she believed Emily wasn't wealthy enough, connected enough, or impressive enough for her son. At family dinners, Victoria constantly made small comments. "You should really dress more professionally. Daniel is used to a certain lifestyle. I hope you understand that being married to a Carter comes with expectations." Emily always smiled politely. She never fought back. Daniel rarely defended her. Whenever Emily complained, he would say, "Just ignore Mom. She'll eventually get used to you." But she never did. Then one evening, everything changed. Daniel came home with a serious expression. "Emily, we need to talk." She immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Daniel placed a folder on the table. "My parents think you took money from the family company." Emily stared at him. "What?" "They found transfers from one of the company accounts." "I didn't take anything." Daniel looked uncomfortable. "I know what you're saying." "No, Daniel. I'm telling you the truth." Victoria suddenly entered the room. Behind her was Daniel's father, Richard. Victoria threw another folder onto the table. "There are records showing money moved into an account connected to you." Emily opened the folder. Her heart raced. The account number looked familiar. But she had never opened it. "I don't know this account." Victoria laughed. "Of course you don't." Richard shook his head. "Emily, we expected better from you." Daniel stood silently. Emily looked at him. "Daniel, you believe them?" He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than the accusation. Victoria pointed toward the door. "You need to leave this house tonight." Emily looked at Daniel. "You're letting them throw me out?" Daniel finally whispered. "I don't know what to believe." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Then believe the person you married." But Daniel couldn't. That night, Emily packed one suitcase. She left the Carter mansion with no money, no explanation, and no idea how someone had used her identity. What nobody knew was that Emily had a secret career. Before marrying Daniel, she had worked for years in the American judicial system. She had studied law, worked as a prosecutor, and eventually been appointed to the bench. But after her marriage, she had deliberately kept her professional life private. Daniel knew she worked in law. He didn't know the full extent of her position. Emily had never cared about status. She wanted a peaceful marriage. Now she realized how badly she had underestimated the people around her. Weeks passed. The Carter family filed a civil case against Emily. They claimed she had committed financial fraud. The story spread quickly. Family members stopped calling. Friends began questioning her. Someone even leaked photographs of Emily leaving the Carter mansion with a suitcase. Online comments called her a gold digger, a fraud, a disgraced wife. Emily remained silent. She knew the truth would eventually come out. But then she discovered something that changed the entire case. The money hadn't gone to her. It had gone through a shell company. And that shell company was connected to someone inside the Carter organization. Emily hired an attorney and requested that the evidence be investigated properly. The case was transferred to a county courtroom. And because of a scheduling issue, a senior judge was replaced by another presiding judge. Emily's name appeared on the assignment. Nobody in the Carter family noticed. They were too busy celebrating. Victoria told relatives, "Finally, we're going to expose her." Daniel looked nervous. "Mom, maybe we should just settle." Victoria shook her head. "No. She embarrassed this family. Today she will learn what happens when you betray a Carter." The courtroom filled the next morning. Emily entered through the judge's chamber. She reviewed the case file. Her expression changed when she saw the financial records. There were discrepancies. Several documents had been altered. Someone had created a trail designed to point directly toward her. But why? Emily had one theory. And she intended to prove it. The bailiff announced, "All rise." Everyone stood. Emily entered. Victoria was whispering to her attorney when she suddenly looked up. Her eyes locked onto Emily. She froze. Daniel slowly stood. "Emily?" Emily sat behind the bench. She looked at the entire courtroom. "Please be seated." Nobody spoke. Victoria's face went white. "This can't be happening." Emily calmly opened the case file. "Mrs. Carter, you may address the court through counsel." Victoria looked at Daniel. "You knew?" Daniel shook his head. "No." Emily looked toward him. For one brief second, their eyes met. There was sadness in hers. Not anger. That somehow made Daniel feel worse. The attorney representing the Carter family stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed." Emily interrupted calmly. "Counsel, I have reviewed the filings." She lifted one document. "There are inconsistencies in the financial records submitted to this court." Victoria's attorney looked nervous. Emily continued. "Specifically, 3 transactions were altered after the original records were generated." Victoria immediately stood. "That is impossible." Emily looked directly at her. "Mrs. Carter, please sit down." Victoria slowly sat. Emily turned toward the courtroom clerk. "Bring up the original transaction records." Within minutes, the screen displayed the company's financial history. The room became silent. The money had never entered Emily's account. Instead, it had moved through an internal corporate account, then into a private consulting company. The consulting company belonged to Richard Carter. Richard suddenly stood. "That doesn't prove anything." Emily looked at him. "It proves the money never went to my client." The attorney looked confused. Emily corrected herself. "To the defendant." Daniel stared at his father. "Dad?" Richard couldn't answer. Victoria began shaking her head. "No. Someone must have changed those records." Emily nodded. "Someone did." She looked toward the courtroom doors. "Call the witness." A former Carter accountant entered. Richard immediately recognized him. His face changed. The accountant walked to the witness stand. Under oath, he explained that he had been ordered to create false records. "Who ordered you?" The room became completely silent. The accountant looked at Richard. "Mr. Carter." Victoria covered her mouth. Daniel looked devastated. "Dad?" Richard lowered his eyes. The accountant continued. "I was told to make it look like the money had been transferred to Emily." Emily asked. "Why?" The accountant hesitated. Because the company was losing money. Mr. Carter had been moving funds to cover personal debts. Daniel stared at his father. How much? The accountant gave the figure. Daniel nearly collapsed into his chair. Millions. The family fortune they had bragged about wasn't what it seemed. Richard had been hiding massive financial problems. And when auditors began asking questions, he needed someone to blame. Emily had become the perfect target. She was an outsider. She had no connection to the company's inner circle. And Richard knew the family would believe him over her. Victoria began crying. But we didn't know. Emily looked at her. You didn't know because you never asked? Victoria lowered her head. Emily continued. You judged me before you ever gave me a chance to defend myself. Daniel looked at Emily. Emily. She didn't respond. He whispered. I was wrong. Emily finally looked at him. Yes. One word. But it carried months of pain. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I should have trusted you. Emily took a breath. You should have. The court eventually dismissed the claims against Emily. The investigation into Richard's financial misconduct continued separately. But Emily had one final decision to make. Daniel approached her outside the courtroom. Can we talk? Emily stopped. What do you want? I want another chance. She looked at him for several seconds. You didn't lose me because my career was a secret. Daniel lowered his eyes. You lost me because when everyone accused me, you chose their voices over mine. I know. And when they humiliated me, you stood there. I know. Emily's voice softened. But I don't hate you. Daniel looked up. Then maybe there's hope. Emily shook her head gently. Forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. Daniel understood. For the first time, he didn't argue. He simply nodded. I hope you're happy. Emily smiled. I will be. She walked away. Not as the woman who had been thrown out of the Carter mansion. Not as the wife they had humiliated. Not as the woman they had accused. She walked away as herself. A woman who had spent years earning her position. A woman who had refused to let betrayal destroy her. And a woman who had finally learned that she didn't need anyone's approval to know her own worth. Months later, Emily returned to the same courthouse for another case. As she entered the courtroom, a young woman waiting outside looked nervous. Emily stopped. Are you okay? The woman shook her head. I'm scared. Emily smiled. That's okay. I'm afraid nobody will believe me. Emily looked at her gently. Then tell the truth. The woman took a deep breath. Emily continued. You don't need to be louder than everyone else. You just need to be honest. The woman smiled. Thank you, Judge. Emily walked into the courtroom. The doors closed behind her. And as the bailiff announced her arrival, Emily took her seat behind the bench. She looked around the courtroom and remembered the day her own family had tried to destroy her reputation. Then she picked up her gavel. Let's begin. Because sometimes, the greatest comeback isn't humiliating the people who hurt you. It's becoming so strong that their opinion no longer controls your life. And the family who once laughed at Emily learned a lesson they would never forget. Never judge someone's worth by the life they show you, because you may have no idea who is sitting quietly in front of you, waiting for the truth to speak for itself.